Hi, I'm James Riley. Welcome to this special Innovation Oz podcast with Minderoo Foundation. I'm speaking today with someone very well known to our listeners and to the broader tech industry, Adrian Turner. Adrian is the director of the Minderoo Fire and Flood Resilience. Welcome, Adrian.
Yeah, hi, James.
And Adrian's probably best known in this country. He was the inaugural CEO of Data 61, the unit of the CSIRO, and ran that in a very high-profile position. And it's interesting, you've kind of taken that tech data lens and applying it to this new role at Minderoo. Just before we get started, one of the interesting little factoids I've come across on the X Prize page is that the Black Summer bushfires in 2020 doubled Australia's carbon emissions, which is quite extraordinary. Firstly, because it's frightening that a bushfire can produce that much carbon, and secondly, because we produce the amount of carbon anyway in a non-bushfire year. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the harm caused by these fires is extraordinary. Having the privilege to go out into these affected communities and talk with real Australians that are trying to get back on their feet. It's carbon emissions. It's the environmental impact. It's the social impact. We were in a town of about 1,000 people a couple of months back, and in the last 12 months, they've had 40 suicides. That's the long tail of these sort of disasters. And then there's an economic impact. And to put it into context, just how tough of a run we've had as a country, in the last 4 years, 70% of Australia's LGAs have been disaster declared. That's not just fire, that's fire, flood, cyclone, other things as well.
It's quite extraordinary. So you're 2 years into that role. I think we spoke pretty early. Is it? It is 2 years, right?
Yeah, it's 2.5 years.
Yeah. We spoke pretty early on when you first joined the Fire and Flood Resilience initiative at Minderoo, and it was all about kind of changing the narrative from response to resilience, and trying to put a funding lens that better reflects the benefits of that. Just off the top of your head, 2.5 years in, like it's been a struggle. I think that message has landed, but I don't know if the dollars have landed. What's happened?
Yeah, without a doubt, the country's shifted and shifting how it thinks about disasters, and it just has to. I mean, the way it's showing up is, insurance is a great indicator. We've got parts of the country now that are uninsurable, and we've got the government having to step into a $10 billion reinsurance pool for Queensland to help keep insurance affordable. But you're right. I mean, this was, for me, this was personal, having a personal experience with the fires. And when we looked at it, we said it's a system. We need to change a system, but no one can do it. Government actually can't do it alone. Industry can't. NGO, charities, philanthropies can't. So how do we bring everyone together and create a vision for what the future could be that's so compelling that everyone leans into it and joins forces on this kind of integrated program of work? And that's what we designed, with 55 partners all having input into that.
So just step me across some of those different areas. Like, as you say, government can't literally can't do the heavy lifting on this, although stepping into an insurance gap. So that implies you need an insurance on board. Tell me, what are the industries that need to be on board to really, to make a difference on the resilience side of this?
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk about it in the context of the disasters and what that means for communities. There's actually, I think, a second-order implication of these disasters that we can talk about too, which is I actually think that these disasters are an existential threat to the country from a national security, sovereignty, democracy point of view, and we'll come to why. So the industries that you need are obviously the insurance sector is most directly aligned incentive-wise to have disasters cause less harm. The other ones are the banks, because if you can't insure a property, then it's very difficult to borrow and get credit. And the banks are carrying risk on their balance sheet around disasters, some of which is, fully quantified and exposed to the market, and some of it's not. Like there's a real shift underway to really quantify the risk. Then you've got retailers, obviously, who rely on logistics networks that have to move products across the country. And then you've got utilities. So you've got telcos and energy companies that have critical infrastructure, and they actually have a regulatory obligation that's fairly recent to take more proactive steps to protect their infrastructure from disaster. Well, really from cybersecurity risk and other risks as well. So that's one shift that's taking place, is everyone pulling together more. The other shift is you see the federal government and state governments moving to an all hazard response. So what they're doing is starting to treat cybersecurity, biosecurity, natural disasters with the same sort of mechanisms for dealing with the crisis. Because if you think about it, a cybersecurity breach is going to show up in a very similar way. If a piece of infrastructure is taken down, as is a natural disaster, which takes down a critical piece of infrastructure.
And this is the national security perspective that you're talking about. You're saying that this has wider implications for our way of life here. Talk us through a little bit about that national security angle.
We need to be resilient as a nation. We need to be able to withstand disruptions and shocks. And there's a high probability, and I think we're seeing this now, where we will be disrupted, and the disruptions will be non-kinetic. They could be cybersecurity, they could be disruption of a supply chain. And our point of view is really there's, aside from the critically important and most important, we need to reduce harm for our communities and for our country. The way we actually rally together and respond to these disasters is an incredible training ground for any sort of non-kinetic disruption that this country may face.
So how do you think, I mean, this is very interesting to me, obviously. Tell me, how do you think we're structured now in terms of that kind of national response, or, could be a hyper-localized response, I guess, and depending on the circumstances. But are our kind of social and political structures geared to what you're talking about, the kind of resilience that you're talking about?
I mean, look, the first thing is, and you asked the question, where's the money flowing? So when we started, there was a productivity commission number that says we spend 3% on resilience and preparation for disasters, and we spend 97% on crisis response. And that's not very different to the dynamic around healthcare. We have a crisis kind of emergency interrupt-driven healthcare system. It certainly was the same with cybersecurity early on when we started building the cybersecurity company out of the US. No one was paying attention preemptively, proactively. It was all about when something goes wrong, we'll throw everything at it to fix it. So you got to ask, like, what's the contributors to that? And part of it is the incentive structures. It takes a lot of will, determination, and foresight to invest to reduce something that may or may not happen in the future, to reduce the harm. So certainly appreciate that that's a difficult thing at times to sell into a population, that we should be making sacrifices now for reducing a potential future harm. But there's been a lot of work done. CSIRO and others have done work that show approximately for every dollar invested in resilience, you actually do save 4 to 11 in response and recovery, let alone the human toll. I mean, the other dimension here is think about all of these families and communities that are being disenfranchised. They don't care whether it's local, state, or federal government that's responding. They just see, in some cases, a response that's not good enough in their eyes. So they become disenfranchised and lose confidence in our institutions. And then you go a step further and you say, well, what about the mental health and well-being, not only of that family, but I think a lot about particularly the kids. Like the kids oftentimes have to get uprooted, taken out of school. They're the ones that are the next generation that we need huge levels of cohesion as a country amongst those. So the incentive systems right now, are upside down, and it's one of these things where the boundary between government and industry needs to be redefined. Industry needs to lean in and solve some of this. Impact philanthropy and NGO and charities need to lean. It needs to be a collective effort.
It's quite extraordinary. I take your point that it's a hard sell about things that might happen, but I would say that between fire, flood, and cyber incidents, I think we can agree that there's a pretty good chance that those things are going to happen, and we don't know where or when. Which I guess brings me to my next question, which is about the X Prize wildfire, this $16 million program launched recently, $16 million over 4 years, seeking entrepreneurs and innovators, I guess, to come up with new systems for dealing with these things. Just step us through that.
Super exciting. So when we looked at the challenge of how do you lift Australia's resilience, you can't just do one thing. We identified 4 things that we need to do. First thing is we need to understand the risk. So we built a national resilience index down to the 200 to 700 households across the entire country, 57,000 SA1s times 45 dimensions of resilience. So we can stack rank where the high risk areas are, and that's informed where we invest. And actually we've encouraged the national system to use that sort of evidence base in the flow of grant funds. So it's not competitive granting, but it's really needs-based granting, because a lot of the vulnerable communities that need it most can't muster the resources to make the grant applications. So data-driven, evidence-based. Then you got to go at the hazard, the fire or the flood, and rethink how we deal with the fire or the flood itself. The second thing we have to do is to lift resilience in our landscapes against fire and flood. And the third thing we have to do is lift resilience in our communities. So we've got programs of work across 3 of those areas. And with fire, what we've done with each of those areas is we set a target to get everyone focused on what are we trying to change. And the target for fire is how do we put out any dangerous fire anywhere in the country in 1 hour by 2025, which sounds ridiculous. But what it did was have amazing new thinking about how we could completely reimagine how we fight fire. And where that took us to was, if you're going to even get close to that, you've got to do it from space. You've got to do real-time fire detection from space. And then we looked closely at that and said, well, what's stopping that today? And the thing that's stopping it is the sensor technology doesn't exist in a civilian context to be able to detect fires well enough, accurately enough. And the second one is the constellation to put those sensors on. Now, the constellation bit is getting solved with low Earth orbit satellite constellations. The sensor bit is what we've posed this grand challenge to the world through this X Prize, and we approached them, we partnered up with them, and we led the design of this space-based detection stream in the X Prize competition. The second part of that competition is using drones to autonomously extinguish fire. But, you know, James, the amazing thing, just a little over a week in, we've had 53 teams from 16 countries registered to compete, including 2 Australian companies.
Yeah, very good. So tell me, what of those companies, have they put forward like dot point ideas? What's the high level thinking so far?
So where it goes from here is they've registered interest. We're actually hoping that we break 100 teams. And X Prize is telling us, aside from the $100 million Elon Musk carbon sequestration X Prize, this is the fastest response that they've had to any competition. So what that says to me is people think they can solve the problem, which is good news. Because you could imagine the next step of that is an always-on global fire watch service that can immediately detect and get information to the ground. It'll change the way we fight fires forever. So the way it works is the first gate will be a desktop review. There's an independent technical assessment committee that looks at the submissions for that desktop review. We're not a part of that committee by design because we're a funder of the competition. We can't be a judge, which I like a lot. It's a true meritocracy. And the other one is that the winners get to keep all of their intellectual property. No one's trying to take claim over their ideas. It's just an acceleration of solving the problem and getting people focused on the problem. The second part is the semi-finals, and we've lined up with RFS in New South Wales, and there'll be another test bed in the Northern Hemisphere. RFS is going to light fires out in the wild under their control and supervision, and they're also going to give us an aerial platform to put the semi-final sensors on to prove the tech out in a real world environment. So
literally, take it you're not talking about a low Earth orbit platform?
No, it could be. They've got a 737 plane, so it's likely to be that.
Yeah, very good. Okay, that's fascinating. It is like these missions. They really are. I mean, everyone's into missions these days. In fact, the Minderoo Foundation itself was founded. It has a mission mentality from the start. So I guess applying it to fire and flood would make sense. I'm interested in why you chose to make it global from the get-go, and I think you did a joint launch, Sydney and Washington.
So we did. We launched at RFS HQ, and we had amazing turnout. We had fire commissioners fly in from interstate. We had Dr. Kathy Foley attend as our national chief scientist, which we appreciate. We had Joe Buffoni, who's the Assistant Director General and Coordinator for Emergency Response for NEMA. So he coordinates all multi-jurisdictional crisis response as well. It was fantastic. And in Washington, we had 150 people at the event. We had 1,000 people tune in online. And we had most of the major US agencies represented, leadership from US Fire Services, USGA. It was phenomenal. And huge enthusiasm for solving the problem.
Tell me this. I'm very interested to know when a fire chief hears you say that you want to put out all fires in Australia within an hour by 2025. I mean, obviously it's a big call and it gets the creative juices flowing. But how do they react to that? Are these people kind of open to the idea that this might be a possibility, or how do they look at it?
So they've been incredibly supportive across all states. Rob Rogers in New South Wales has been at the front of that. And when we started, there was a healthy dose of skepticism about, who Minderoo is and why you think you can make a difference in this area. And what we did was we've really sat alongside them and said, you understand fire. you help define the functional requirements for what this system needs to be and do, so it's useful to you when the problem gets solved. We can act as almost like a convener or advanced technology group to bring together the right players to demonstrate and de-risk what's possible. And that's what we've done. So it literally took us 12 plus months to define the right question to pose as a challenge. That's the hardest part of these missions is, what are you actually trying to solve? How do you quantify it and measure it and get everyone pointed at it? At Data 61, we experimented with the mission model around food security and traceability and brought in Dr. Karen O'Connor, who helped stand up the Next Gen Tech Fund for Defence. And Karen's in the Minderoo team as well. So we think that it's been, not every day has been a good day, but we think we've really cracked the code on how to make these mission models work. And we've effectively leveraged an investment that Minderoo's made now about 30x globally, with an integrated program of work that's 70 projects and about 100 partners pulling towards the same outcome. And there's a lot of things that have worked along the way, some things that haven't worked, but we're big believers in this mission model. What we don't see is a lot of people around the world actually making it work. And I think the team has made it work.
Adrian Turner, it's great to talk to you again. You've obviously got the next 4 years mapped out, right? With the X Prize initiative that you've got going now. Tell me about what else. Where's your focus in the next couple of years with fire and flood resilience?
So when we started this program, we communicated an end date of 2025, and we did that intentionally. We said we're going to solve some things by 2025 with others, with and through partners. And the reason that we communicated that end date was to be clear that we're not trying to build an empire. We're not trying to displace anyone. We're not trying to build an empire. We're trying to kind of reimagine how we deal with some of these problems and make it work operationally and in partnership with operating partners. So obviously some of the work will carry through 2025, but Minderoo won't run the constellation that runs the Firewatch service. So the next 12 months is pinning down one or more constellations that will take the winning sensor, and we're well progressed with those conversations. The second bit about landscapes, where there's this whole area around, it's called natural capital accounts. It's creating consistent standards for measuring our environment so that you can unlock new financial instruments for investing in land management. And we built the world's biggest natural capital accounts that we released 3 months ago in the Burnett area, 5.5 million hectares. So that work will continue on in conjunction with conservancy organisations and financial services organisations and NRMs, which are the bodies that manage the environment. The community piece, we launched the Australian Resilience Corps as a new volunteer group to sit between Defence and SES and RFS 12 months ago. And the target there is 125,000 volunteers by 2025 to go in the off-season to lift resilience in communities in a way that's community-led. So if that happens, that'll be 3 times bigger than reserves, defence reserves. And the volunteers are coming from corporate Australia and universities, and it's tracking extraordinarily well. There's a huge appetite for this, and particularly for young people to give back. If you think about climate change, where people kind of generally feel helpless, what can I do? This is something you can do. Disasters show up every year, and they're one manifestation of shifting climate. So we will not be the long-term operator of the Resilience Corps. So we'll be building a collective of organisations that will carry that forward beyond 2025.
Looks very exciting to hear this stuff. I guess with the Resilience Corps, I don't know. Personal resilience, I've found, always starts with action. It's been great to watch. Great to see you leaving a mark, and great to talk to you now.
Thanks, James.